I saw the workshop back in July and was very impressed with the singers. So let me start out with them, if I can.
Yeah.
Did you have specific voices and or singers in mind when you started?
You know, in a way, Dwight, I always have singers in my head because I've been lucky enough to work with a lot of great singers. So in some ways, I could always cast a performance with friends of mine, but a lot of times they're not available, and so you begin the process of finding singers, of auditioning singers. And the cast we have now is extraordinary. We had to change some people from the workshop you saw, simply because we learned more about the piece,
right?
In watching it at the workshop. And by the way, it'll be very different from what you saw at the workshop. But for example, we had a tenor in the workshop who he was cast for us, and he was actually too old because the tenor has to play the son. He's sort of the youngest role in the piece. So we had to recast the tenor, and we've recast the tenor and the mezzo, and in some ways it just all worked out in that this cast really looks like a family, and we also had to recast. There are two African American roles. One is Ondi Moore, and she's still doing it, and we have a new guy named Kevin Newberry who's absolutely extraordinary.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So there have been changes, but then that's the nature of this. When you're creating a new work, there will be evolution.
Yeah, it's the whole point of doing a workshop is that you get to hear the material and you know better what you need. Like, for example, you saw the workshop and you will hear many songs you didn't hear in that workshop.
All right.
And we changed a lot of things after the workshop.
All right. Did you entered into this idea deliberately not quoting 19th century American music? Is that correct? And what was the reason for that?
Well, first of all, Dwight, let me say this, that I don't. There are moments when I have quotes, and I don't deliberately quote it, but more what I meant by that, it's not about quoting, it's about the flavor of the score. I didn't want to do a sort of Civil War pastiche. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
I feel as though that has been done, and we have heard, the great Ken Burns documentary has as much to say about the music of that time as anyone needs to hear at this moment, I think. The point is, I felt, since I was the one who was asked to do it, that it was my interpretation of those times, my filtering these experiences of these people through my own particular body of experience that would make it an original piece. And because it was my idea to do this sort of series of snapshots, personal stories rather than panoramas, right? I just felt like what I needed to do in order to make this piece as personal for myself as possible was process these stories, internalize them, and see what kind of music it elicited. And so consequently, like, for example, there is sort of a fife and drum effect often in the orchestration, but the songs, I would say, though they nod to those times, are sort of, it's a contemporary take on that material.
Okay, I see. And the music is ultimately, I guess, very personal. You've used that word, very much keyed to the individual person and to the events surrounding that person.
Yes, like it was very, the second I was asked to do it, I knew instinctively that if I was going to write some kind of Civil War piece, I didn't want to write something that was, a big narrative panorama that included battle sequences and that pretended to tell the whole story of that gigantic war.
Mm-hmm.
And I kept thinking, I thought immediately of something called Spoon River Anthology,
yes,
which is a collection of sort of epitaphs that kind of make up a whole community. And so what I wanted to do with this piece was somehow through letters and journal entries and both fictional and real characters create a sort of panorama that was culled from personal stories, and that's why I invited Mark Campbell into the process. And he is the one who sort of brilliantly narrowed it down to one county in Virginia. For first of all, deciding that it should be Virginia, since we were commissioned by the Virginia Opera and the Virginia Arts Festival to write it. But then by narrowing it down to one county and to splitting up to each year of the war, we were really able to it's like, in some ways, Dwight, the more limitations you create for yourself, the more liberated you are in the writing of it. And so Mark, by sort of narrowing us down, actually liberated us so that we could really speak. And so that's, it's very personal, but for me, I always think the personal is universal, because how different can if you really go through your heart and soul, how different is anyone's experience of anything? We're all human beings,
Exactly, yes. And I was thinking about one piece that has stuck with me, The Good Death. That would apply to almost any war anywhere.
Oh, and Dwight, I can't wait till you see not only what that piece looks like now, but what it sounds like with the orchestra. It's quite startling. I mean, yes. And by the way, interestingly, Dwight, a lot of our information, we were very impressed with Edward Ayers and his book, In the Presence of Mine Enemies. But I would say The Good Death was probably more inspired by Drew Gilpin Faust's book, The Republic of Suffering, that she wrote last year. Her book was all completely just about death and the battlefield. And this whole notion of the good death, that is one where Wendell sort of went all out in terms of what's projected during that song.
Right. And Mark Campbell had delivered to you just an incredible set of lyrics.
Yeah, incredible.
Just pure poetry.
Yeah, and they're utterly brilliant, and they were really inspiring to me, and they were really easy to enter, because I'm very sensitive to text. I'm a writer myself, and so I'm very picky about who I work with, and can be picky with who I work with. But with Mark, he entered this piece so deeply, and I think a lot of it, too, was we both were aware of the portent, the importance of this material. You don't want to sell it short. And I think that's why Mark stayed very close to Ed Ayers in the writing of it. He showed Ed Ayers the lyrics before he showed them to me when he wrote them. He wanted to make sure that there was an authenticity, and he often would rewrite them and rewrite them. It's almost like each lyric was processed in a way that Mark sort of boiled the idea down to a stock. So that by the time I got it, it felt so refined and filtered, and it was really my privilege to enter them and find the music for them, find the gesture.
Exactly. You mentioned the orchestration. When composing the pieces, did you have a specific orchestration in mind, or did that evolve also?
Well, right from the beginning, and this was sort of, maybe this is how in terms of creating limitations, I said right when they asked me, I said 4 singers, 15 players. I do not know where those numbers came from, Dwight, but at that moment it seemed manageable to me.
Right.
So it evolved because Mark doesn't like symmetry, so he said let's have 5 singers, and then we decided at a certain point we needed 17 players rather than 15. But I wanted it to, even as I was writing it, and the whole time I was thinking about it, I thought of it as sounding very transparent. And it does. It almost, when you hear the orchestration, it's really like it's 17 players from the Virginia Symphony, right? But it's like 17 soloists.
Okay.
There are moments when it's just one player at a time. It's very transparent orchestration, which, by the way, makes it perilous, too. Like last night, the first violinist asked me, did you really mean it for this few strings? And I said, I'm aware that it would sound great with a full string section, but the truth is we wanted to write a piece that can be done, Dwight. I mean, the exigencies of the opera world are such right now that everybody is suffering economically. And a piece that's for 5 singers and 17 players is very doable.
It also lends a more intimate feel to
Well,
it, doesn't
yeah,
it?
exactly. And that is what we wanted to do. We didn't want to create some gigantic, heroic panorama. This is like when the camera closes in. This is a piece about close-ups.
Mm-hmm. So we're counting hours now, and you said that you were very satisfied with what you have that is going to go on stage on Tuesday. It is going to be an exciting event. I know it's been talked about for a long, long time around here, and it's going to be one of the events of the season to see this wonderful work on stage, and we congratulate you for the efforts, you and Mark and Ed and the whole crew.
Thank you, Dwight.
Thank you very much for talking with us.
All right.
All right.
See you there.
I'll be there.
Okay, bye.
Thanks, Ricky. Bye.